Princess Anne is running the show now. It's officially a fact. Right now, the headlines are screaming about a shocking midnight meeting at Buckingham Palace where King Charles supposedly handed full palace authority over to his sister. They're talking about cleared corridors, locked doors, and a sudden dramatic shift in power. But look, if you stop listening to the breathless rumors and actually look at the facts from the past year, you realize something else entirely. This wasn't some frantic midnight twist. It wasn't a panic move cooked up in the dark. Honestly, it was the only logical choice the king could have made. This power shift didn't start with a secret meeting. It's the result of a lifetime of absolute loyalty. So how did we actually get here? To understand what's really going on, we have to rewind to early 2024. That's when the entire royal machinery got hit with a massive shock. King Charles's cancer diagnosis. Publicly, of course, the palace was perfectly calm. The official statements were all very measured, very reassuring, telling the world that the king was in great spirits and still working. But behind closed doors, things were changing fast. The king was dealing with a serious illness, and he was visibly exhausted. And while he was fighting an invisible battle, someone had to keep the monarchy moving. That person was Anne, but what actually happened during that rumored late-night meeting that has everyone talking, and what changed to make this lifetime of quiet support suddenly look like a palace takeover? Look, when the king had to pull back for his treatments, the palace couldn't just shut its doors. The monarchy relies on being seen. If you aren't visible, you don't exist. And that's exactly where Anne turned into the family's ultimate fallback option. Throughout the rest of 2024, she didn't just fill a few empty slots on the calendar. She literally took over the calendar. Think about the numbers here. She carried out more than 217 public engagements that year alone. That wasn't just a personal best. It was the highest number of any senior working royal in the entire family. While everyone else was managing their own schedules or stepping back, Anne was out there on the ground, attending ceremonies, honoring commitments, and holding the whole institution together. And honestly, the most wild part about this isn't even the massive workload. It's what happened in the middle of it. During that exact same year, she had a terrible riding accident. She literally fell off a horse and suffered a serious concussion. Now, for almost anyone else, a head injury like that means a hard stop. Weeks of rest, dark rooms, and completely stepping away from public life. But Anne, she essentially just shook it off. She went right back to work, kept her head down, and still outpaced every single person in her family. It wasn't just a tough year. It was a masterclass in sheer grit. So when people say she's suddenly stepping up now because of a crisis, it completely misses the point. She isn't stepping up. She's been doing this exact same thing for decades, which brings us right to that rumored, breathless late-night meeting at Buckingham Palace. According to the reports flying around, King Charles called an unscheduled, totally private audience with his sister. And look, Buckingham Palace is one of the most schedule-obsessed places on the planet. Literally everything is tracked, logged, and cleared by teams of staff weeks in advance. Nothing happens out of nowhere. But for this specific meeting, aides were reportedly cleared out of the hallways. It didn't appear on a single official document, no press releases, no carefully worded statements from the media team, nothing. When you clear out the halls of a palace in the middle of the night, it's not an accident. It means someone in power has decided that whatever is about to happen cannot be seen by the wrong eyes. The rumors claim this was the exact moment Charles handed over the keys to the kingdom. But if you actually look at the history between these two, you start to realize the decision wasn't made that night. It was made decades ago during a shared childhood that most people would find completely bizarre. So what really happened when they were growing up that made Charles trust her above everyone else? To understand the depth of that trust, you have to realize that Charles and Anne have been a team since day one. They were born just 21 months apart, Charles in November 1948, and Anne in August 1950. In a world as strange and isolated as the royal family, that tiny age gap meant everything. They were each other's very first companions, growing up in a high-stakes environment where almost nobody else could understand what their lives were actually like. And it wasn't exactly a normal childhood. Their parents were constantly away on massive, months-long royal tours. While the king and queen were traveling the world, Charles and Anne were left behind in the palace, spending nearly all their time together. They played, studied, and explored the palace grounds side by side. They didn't have the kind of freedom that regular kids take for granted, but they had each other. And honestly, that shared, deeply structured loneliness created a bond that time couldn't touch. But it wasn't just about playing in palace hallways, it was about survival. As they grew older, their personalities ended up completely different, but they fit together perfectly. Charles was always the sensitive one, thoughtful, quiet, a boy who loved art, nature, and music. Anne was the exact opposite. She was confident, completely direct, and unshakably practical. Where Charles hesitated, Anne acted. Where he doubted himself, she gave him a backbone. You can see the absolute proof of this during Charles's school years. His father insisted on sending him to Gordonstoun, a famously brutal boarding school in the remote, freezing north of Scotland. Charles absolutely hated it. He famously called the place Colditz in Kilts, a reference to a grim wartime prisoner of war camp, the freezing weather, the intense discipline, and the total isolation made his life complete misery. And who do you think he turned to? Anne. She was one of the only people he actually confided in during those dark years. She listened to him without judging, and more importantly, she fiercely defended him from anyone in the royal family who tried to tease him for being soft. That kind of fierce, protective loyalty is incredibly rare, especially in a family where duty usually overrides personal feelings. Anne showed Charles early on that she had his back no matter what, but childhood protection is one thing. What happens when the stakes get raised, the world turns hostile, and the entire media landscape tries to tear you apart? That childhood loyalty didn't fade when they grew up. If anything, it became Charles's absolute lifeline when his life completely melted down in the public eye. Think back to the 1980s and 90s. Charles's marriage to Princess Diana was collapsing, and it wasn't just a private tragedy. It was a global media circus. Every single day, the front pages were filled with messy headlines, leaked tapes, and brutal gossip. The entire world was picking sides, and Charles's public image was sinking to an all-time low. He was isolated, deeply disliked, and trapped in a massive scandal. So what did Anne do? Exactly what she did back at boarding school. She put her head down and refused to play the game. While the rest of the world was talking, Anne stayed completely silent. She didn't do explosive tell-all interviews. She didn't leak stories to friendly journalists, and she didn't add fuel to the media fire. Instead, she just showed up to work, did her job, and offered her brother a quiet, completely private, safe zone. She stood by him when almost nobody else would, not because it was good PR, but because she was his sister. That's the kind of loyalty you can't buy, and it's something Charles never forgot. Fast forward to recent years, after the loss of their parents, whenever you saw them together at major events like Queen Elizabeth's funeral procession, they weren't just two royals following a strict protocol. They were walking side by side, exchanging quiet words, and leaning on each other. You could see the shared grief, but also the deep comfort of having the only other person who truly understood the weight of their lives close by. So when people look at the palace right now and ask, why Anne? Why not Prince William or Queen Camilla? The answer is incredibly simple. It's because Anne is the only person alive who has known Charles his entire life, who has seen him at his absolute lowest, and who has never once let him down. You can't replicate that with a fancy title or an official palace protocol. But look, this isn't just a sweet story about sibling bonding. There's a much sharper institutional edge to this decision. Because by elevating Anne to this level of authority, Charles didn't just pick a trusted ally, he also sent a massive, undeniable signal to the rest of the family, especially to his wife. What is the real story behind the rumored icy showdown between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla? And how does that tension explain why Anne was given the keys to the palace? Now, there is another layer to this story that completely complicates things, and honestly, it adds a whole different dimension to why Anne's elevated role matters so much. For a while now, rumors have been swirling about some serious behind-the-scenes tension between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla. Look, we are dealing with anonymous palace sources here, so we can't verify every single word, but if the reports coming out of the palace are even remotely accurate, there is a quiet, intense battle of wills playing out in the shadows. The most striking story happened during a formal royal banquet. It should have been an evening of pure elegance and polite small talk, but instead, things allegedly went completely ice cold. According to palace insiders, Camilla had been quietly pushing to drop the word consort from her official title, wanting to be referred to simply as the Queen. And that is exactly when Anne reportedly stopped her dead in her tracks. Right there at the dinner table, Anne supposedly looked directly at her and said, "You are the Queen consort, not the Queen." Can you imagine the silence in that room? Absolutely chilling. Now, whether those exact devastating words were spoken or not, the sentiment behind them tracks perfectly with everything we know about Anne. She was fiercely, deeply loyal to her mother, Queen Elizabeth II. And remember, before she passed away, the late Queen explicitly made it her sincere wish that Camilla should be known strictly as Queen Consort, a respectful nod to tradition and, let's be real, the enduring shadow of Princess Diana. Anne reportedly reminded Camilla of this more than once, basically telling her, "The Queen said you should remain Queen Consort." That's what she wanted. To Anne, this wasn't just a petty argument about labels or a personal grudge. It was about protocol. It was about protecting her mother's legacy and drawing a hard line against what she saw as Camilla overreaching and trying to subtly reshape the family's inner structure. And right in the middle of this silent war stood King Charles, pulled between a wife shaping a new chapter for the monarchy and a sister fiercely guarding its history. So if you view the recent power shift through that lens, Charles's decision to give Anne full authority takes on a massive new meaning. It's not just a practical layout for when he's sick. It is a huge, undeniable statement about whose judgment he trusts most when the chips are down. By putting Anne in charge of key palace responsibilities, the king is effectively signaling that when he isn't there, Anne's voice carries the ultimate weight. Not Camilla's, Anne's. It explains exactly why that midnight meeting happened the way it did. No schedules, no press releases, and no palace machinery softening the blow. But look, while the palace intrigue makes for a great story, there is another side to this sudden shift in authority that has nothing to do with royal titles and everything to do with a massive multi-million-pound financial ticking clock. What is the hidden crisis threatening Princess Anne's family home, and why does the king's illness make solving it incredibly urgent? But look, while the palace intrigue makes for a great story, there is another side to this sudden shift in authority that has nothing to do with royal titles and everything to do with a massive financial ticking clock. It involves a crisis threatening Princess Anne's own family home and why the king's illness makes solving it incredibly urgent. Let's talk about Gatcombe Park. It's a massive 730-acre countryside estate in Gloucestershire. Back in 1976, Queen Elizabeth II bought the property for her daughter, reportedly paying somewhere between £500,000 and £750,000. But over the decades, the property market did what it always does, and today that estate is valued at a staggering £15 million. It is a beautiful, sprawling piece of land. It has a grade 2 listed manor house, stables, and a working farm. It's also where Anne's children, Zara Tyndall and Peter Phillips, live with their own families. For them, it's not just a piece of royal real estate, it's home. It's where they are raising their kids, and it's a place holding immense sentimental value. Anne fully intends to pass this legacy down to her children, but that inheritance comes with a brutal multi-million pound catch. And honestly, this is the part that trips up a lot of people. In the United Kingdom, inheritance tax is incredibly unforgiving. It's charged at a flat 40% on any estate that sits above the £325,000 threshold. So if you do the math on a £15 million estate, Zara and Peter aren't just inheriting a house, they are inheriting a potential tax bill of around £2.28 million. And here's where the real pressure sets in. Under UK law, that massive bill doesn't just sit around forever. The government typically requires the money to be paid within 6 months of the inheritance. If the heirs don't have millions in cash just sitting in a bank account, it creates an immediate, agonizing financial squeeze. The absolute last thing Zara and Peter want to do is sell off pieces of their forever home just to pay the taxman. Obviously, a terrible situation to navigate, but the family isn't completely trapped. They actually have a few strategic options on the table. For one, there is the spousal exemption. If Anne passes the estate to her husband, Sir Timothy Lawrence, the entire transfer is completely tax-free under UK law. The property stays safe, no tax is paid, and the financial burden can be safely pushed down the road. There are other tools, too. They can utilize standard tax allowances like the nil rate bans to shield up to £500,000 per person. Or Anne can start lifetime gifting, gradually transferring chunks of the estate to her kids right now. But under UK law, life gifting comes with its own gamble. The person making the gift has to survive for at least 7 years after giving it away, or the tax applies anyway. They could also use complex discretionary trusts or try to qualify for agricultural property relief, since massive parts of Gatcombe operate as a working farm. The point is, managing this kind of high-stakes transition requires flawless long-term planning, and you have to wonder if the sudden urgency surrounding the king's illness didn't just push the crown to reorganize its public duties, but also forced the family to quietly fast-track their own private survival plans. And that brings us directly to Anne's husband, Sir Timothy Lawrence. He is a fascinating, quiet figure who has spent decades standing in the margins of the royal world. But a recent, highly deliberate move by King Charles shows that the man in the background is suddenly playing a massive role in where the monarchy goes next. So what did the king do for Sir Timothy, and why does it signal a major shift in the palace power structure? And that brings us directly to the man who has spent decades standing in the shadows of the royal world, Sir Timothy Lawrence. For a long time, he has existed purely in the soft margins of the House of Windsor, present, steadfast, and almost completely invisible. His name rarely hits the front pages, and his voice is seldom heard outside palace walls. He's not a prince, and he doesn't do spectacle. But those who watch the royal family closely know that in this family, silence isn't just a trait, it's a strategy. And Sir Timothy has absolutely mastered it. He built his entire life on discipline. Born in 1955, he was a career naval officer who climbed the ranks of the Royal Navy with quiet distinction. His colleagues always described him as methodical, incredibly polite, and deeply discreet. Back in the 1980s, he was appointed as an equerry to Queen Elizabeth II, which basically put him right inside the inner machinery of the household. He organized schedules, accompanied the Queen on trips, and learned how to navigate that razor-thin line between service and secrecy. And it was during that exact duty that he met Princess Anne. At the time, Anne's first marriage was completely unraveling under a swarm of press gossip. But inside that storm, a quiet companionship formed. Timothy was just different from everyone else around her. He was disciplined, completely steady, and incredibly reserved. Over time, professional trust turned into something deeper, and they eventually married in a modest, tiny ceremony up in Scotland. It was a royal wedding, completely stripped of pageantry, no massive crowds, no television cameras, and unlike almost anyone else who marries into the inner circle, he received no title, no princely honors, and no official royal role. He became simply her husband, a man without a crown, standing 2 steps behind, yet always right beside her. For 30 years, through state funerals, overseas tours, and endless family crises, he was just there, the dependable, quiet presence in the background. So when King Charles recently called him into a private ceremony and made him a Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, people who understand the hidden language of the monarchy took serious notice. This wasn't just a routine, polite gesture. In the royal world, every medal carries a message, and every ribbon whispers intent. This specific honor is given entirely at the personal discretion of the king. Zero government input allowed. By giving Timothy the highest title available in the order, Charles wasn't just rewarding 30 years of quiet service, he was sending a massive signal. The timing, coming right alongside Anne's massive elevation in palace authority, is not a coincidence. It leaves us with a family entirely reorganized for a new, uncertain chapter. A king facing a brutal illness, an heir being held back for the future, and a sister holding the reins. So where does all of this drama, the secret meetings, and the midnight decrees actually leave the British monarchy? When you strip away the theater of the palace walls, what is the real story here? So where does all of this actually leave us? We have a king dealing with a serious health battle who has formally placed his sister in a position of unprecedented authority. We have a Princess Royal who has been quietly running the show for years, maintaining an incredible pace with 478 public events in 2025 alone. We have a Queen Consort who, if the reports are accurate, has been firmly reminded of the constitutional boundaries of her role. And we have an heir in William, who is being fiercely protected, given the space to raise his young family while he is prepared for a long-term future. The official story is that this was a shocking midnight twist, a sudden royal shakeup that sent panic waves through Britain. But when you look at the actual facts, it stops looking like a crisis and starts looking completely inevitable. Think back to where this all began, and think back to that remote, freezing boarding school in Scotland where a lonely, sensitive boy turned to his fierce, practical sister to help him survive the cold halls of Gordonstoun. When you realize that Anne has been Charles's practical defender since they were children, everything shifts. This power move isn't about modern palace intrigue, a sudden illness, or a dramatic midnight audience. It is the final, formal recognition of a lifetime partnership. When everything was on the line, King Charles didn't turn to a new strategy or a fancy political playbook. He did what he has done his entire life whenever he faced his darkest battles. He turned to the one person who has never, ever let him down. He just wanted his sister. And honestly, that's not a palace coup. It's just a brother leaning on the most reliable anchor he has ever known.